and today Courtney does not even know if he is alive. Her determination and will to not let her past define her future has allowed her to create the life that she didn't think was possible, and she wants to show you how you can do the same. Courtney Koh is a Korean American with a wide range of experiences, personally and professionally, which allows her to understand people from various walks of life as a health and wellness coach. You are going to thoroughly enjoy Courtney's interview today.
Have you ever felt like giving up, quitting, throwing in the towel? Welcome to Never Ever Give Up Hope featuring Carol Graham. She's an author, health coach, and motivational speaker. Backed into a corner multiple times in her life, Carol shares with you stories on how she overcame some of the toughest obstacles a person can go through in life, but refused to give up hope. Rather than admit defeat, an opportunity was presented, and it involves each and every one of you. Carol will feature spectacular guests who will share their messages of hope, encouragement, and their inspiration to prove why life's adversities only make you stronger. And now, welcoming the host of the show, here's Carol Graham.
So pleased to have Courtney Koh on Never Ever Give Up Hope today. She is going to share her story, and I know that many of you will relate. So let us begin. First of all, welcome Courtney, and just tell us your story.
Thank you, Carol, for that wonderful introduction. My story begins in Korea, when I was a little child. My mother, because of her upbringing during the Korean War and being abandoned by her mother, it just grew a chain of traumatic experiences within my lineage. And my grandmother, who grew up during World War II, she herself had a number of traumas that she's had to deal with during her lifetime. And so all of those have had certain parts in my life during my upbringing, which has had traumatic impact and significantly emotionally, physically, mentally affected me in so many ways that I had no idea about that being in the generational traumas that my family endured. So from Korea, my family, my mom, my dad, my youngest brother, we all moved over to Chicago because my grandmother brought us over. She invited us over to immigrate to the US. And so my life pretty much started all over again when I was 7 years old in Chicago.
Wow.
And yes, it was actually literally 4 days after my 7th birthday, my family all moved over to Chicago. 4 days after my 7th birthday.
What a
So
culture shock.
major. It was a significant culture shock. And so it's just, I remember being in my classroom just crying in the bathroom because I was so scared and frustrated
Aw.
and traumatized because I didn't know how to speak any English at all at the time. And my school at the time did not have any ESL teachers.
Hmm.
So I had nothing to go off of. So that was how my school years all started, with just being a traumatized child who had no word of English to speak with, and just being in a situation where I had no idea it was even happening and just being thrown into it.
So at that point, how did you, now, if you can remember, I realize you were a
Mhm.
little girl. How did you cope with that? Like just from a, from a personal perspective.
So, coping with that, it was when I was in school, that was going into the little bathroom and crying was my coping
Aw.
method there in school. But at home, it was because I was still living with my parents, and at that time, I was living with my grandmother too. So, being in that little environment, I was okay because I was still with my family and we all spoke the same language.
Okay, good.
Yes. And so from there, once my parents realized that they needed to do something to help us with this, they were able to find a school that actually had a Korean ESL teacher. And that was a big impact for me because that's where the basis of my English was foundationally built on.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. Having a Korean ESL teacher in my life made a significant impact, and that was when everything changed for me. That was when when it was first and second grade, and then my third grade, my parents decided to move, and so I was no longer in that school with my teacher, but I was fine after that. So I was able to move to a school that didn't have an ESL teacher and be able to, you know, learn my education and everything without having a ESL teacher anymore in my life.
This is probably quite a common scenario, I would think, because of different people that have come from so many different countries. But
Yes.
looking at it from your perspective, as an American born individual myself, we don't see that side of it, and the, especially for children, the trauma and the uncertainty and all that. So what I am seeing in you, just as you're sharing already just a little bit of your story, is you're a survivor, just in that alone. And so my hat is off to you just for that and how you've, but we want to hear the rest of your story. So please continue. I just wanted to throw that in that, we welcome you and are very proud, um, that what you have accomplished so far.
Thank you. Um, yes, as being a survivor was something that I've always identified myself with, and because of everything that my family was able to overcome through what my grandmothers went through, what my parents went through, because they grew up during the Korean War, and so and my grandmother being growing up during World War II, those I mean, just from my lineage, it was just so much survivorship that endured. And so for me, being a survivor was something that was an identity for me. But then I wanted to go beyond that survivor, you know, identity, and I wanted to instead of just getting by and just surviving, I wanted to come to a point where in my life where I was thriving and to be able to help people identify that you don't always have to be in the survivor stage where you're just trying to figure out how to get by to your next day or how to just live your life, just being scared.
So that motivated you then. That was your motivation.
Yes.
And just expound a little bit more on that. Like, that's huge. I mean, you took on something huge, and it shows your empathy, that you could only have because you understood both sides.
Understanding the difference between surviving and thriving, I had to process what my parents went through and what that had affected them and
Mm-hmm.
how that was affecting me. I had to figure out how and understand that portion to be able to process it all and understand and get to a point where I'm able to thrive. And so understanding what my grandmother went through, understanding what my mother went through, and then processing the experiences that I was experiencing through the upbringing with my mother was an emotional roller coaster.
Mm. In what way?
In what way? Was because I didn't understand why I was experiencing the traumatic, what I thought at the time was just disciplining, but it was actually beyond discipline because it was physical and emotional abuse that I
Mm.
was experiencing from my own mother, who I thought was, supposed to love and care for me and be
Right.
there for me. But understanding that because she didn't have that in her upbringing,
Hmm.
her frustration and her misunderstanding was what I was experiencing in my life, which I basically came to understand that later in my years.
Of course. Hindsight, right?
Yes, and understanding what I was experiencing with my grandmother because of what she had endured in her life. Like when we first came to America, it was for whatever reason, the refrigerator was always full of food. She would always, you know, pile stuff in the
Hmm.
freezer, pile stuff in the refrigerator. There was always something in the fridge. And later, I basically realized she had a thing about food because when she grew up, there was so much scarcity.
Right, right.
And so there was a lot of understanding aha moments for my parents, what they went through, what my grandmother went through, that I understood at later in my year. And then it just, from there, that processing and that understanding eventually came to a point where, like, I get it now.
And that's why you can help others. That's your basic what you're doing, correct?
Yes.
So tell me what ACE or ACEs is.
So ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. There's total about 8 categories, but most of the people who have experienced ACEs, um, they deal with either emotional trauma or parental divorce or separation or someone in the household who had
Mm.
substance abuse.
Hmm.
Yes.
So you experienced a lot of those things.
Yes.
What happened with your brother? You had mentioned that, or I had mentioned that in the intro. Um, just, is this part of what you're talking about?
Yes. So my brother, when we were in our teenage years, we were very rebellious because of how our mother was raising us.
Mm.
She was physically violent. She was what she called as disciplining, was leaving bruises on our bodies from
Oh.
whatever she could grab. So to deal with that, we were rebellious and we, you know, didn't do so well in school and stuff. And so,
Of course. Yes.
yes. And so that led to our aces, and my brother coping it in his own ways was getting into substance abuse. So he was getting into meth with his friends, and that eventually led to dependency, and he just left our family because he didn't want to be around us while he was dealing with that.
How did you deal with that at the time? Do you recall?
I remember that I saw him walking in the street one day, and then I told him, just come home with me. Just come home. Just, but he refused, and he just told me to go, and he just kept on walking his way. And that was the last I remember of my brother.
How heartbreaking is that, too, right?
Yes, it was. And trying not to bring that up was, it was a pain that I had to eventually face in order to be able to move past that, as so that I can accept and be able to talk about it and be able to share that story so others can understand and try to help their families if they could.
Well, I appreciate you sharing this because it certainly was from your heart. And I also know that talking about things like this and talking about past pain um, definitely affects us. I mean, just because we can go about our daily day and not think about it, and then, something like this comes up or whatever, it all becomes very real again very quickly. So I thank you so much for sharing that from your heart and also your empathy towards others now. And this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what you are doing now to help people who have been in similar situations, and also just how to apply the methods that you have to helping people no matter what trauma they have gone through. So I thank you, and we will be right back.
Thank you.
Carol Graham would like to show you the path from misery to miraculous triumph in her fast-paced memoir, Battered Hope. She relates her determination to succeed as someone who experienced one horrendous nightmare after another: gang raped and left for dead, loss of a child, husband falsely imprisoned, and cancer. Nothing could break her tenacity or faith. No matter what you face, heartache, loss, suffering, or injustice, Carol will illustrate how she became a victor the same way you can. The secret is to never, ever give up hope. Order your copy at Amazon or batteredhope.blogspot.com.
Tell us how ACEs impacts families and communities, schools, etc., and just anything that you think the audience would be interested in hearing about that type of impact, which they may never have heard anything about before. So just share what ACEs is doing.
Okay. So one of the things that I would love to share about ACEs is adults who are dealing with ACEs and how some don't even realize it and they're just living their life because that's what they know how to do and that's what they have been doing. But once that is addressed about their own ACEs, there's so many moments where people can actually see that how that has been affecting their life throughout their whole career, family, and personal relationships. And how that also gets passed down to their own children. So what I advocate is for adults who are dealing with ACEs and how they can break that chain themselves and to be able to heal and grow past their pain and trauma and be able to live their life in a way that they never thought was possible. Adults who are dealing with ACEs who get to a point in their life where there's got to be something more to this that is causing a cycle of personal relationships that are not fulfilling or careers that just don't feel fulfilling. And people who deal with substance, smoking, alcohol, just anything of a dependent nature of a substance that can just be stemming from something that they have dealt with, that they have seen in their childhood, that has just been part of their life, and that's something that they don't even realize it themselves.
So, do you help people then to look past their pain? Is that how you would describe it?
So one of the ways that I help people would be able to realize their pain, and that was their point where they would be able to draw strength from those experiences,
Mm.
because some people have shame, and some people try to just keep that down and not address it, and that becomes a source of you know a pain that just gets bigger and bigger, but it just never really gets addressed until it just comes to a point where something happens in their life, and it just eventually comes up as a physical chronic or some kind of illness. It's
That's a good point, right? And stress can do that too, correct?
absolutely
So, how do you deal with that? Is that in counseling or what?
how I help people deal with that is helping them through seeing their life in a way that they're able to feel gratitude for
Mm.
their life experiences, and being able to be at a point in their life where they're able to see that and appreciate that and draw strength from that, and be able to grow beyond that.
And is that a process? Like, do you do coaching with that, or what is that?
Yes. So that is a coaching that I would be able to guide them to be able to get to that point where they're able to get to themselves. Because so the process that I help people go through is to be able to process what they have experienced in their life, and to be able to see that from a different perspective of
Mm.
them being a survivor, and how to move beyond that survivor mode and into a thriving state where they're able to draw strength from what they have experienced, and to be able to move on past and be able to create the life that they love. So, some of the steps that I would be able to help with people who are interested in my coaching would be, first step is what I call gratitude generator.
Okay.
And from there, in that step, they would be looking at what they're currently experiencing, taking an inventory of what's going on in their mind, and what what their frustrations are, and come to a point where they're able to reframe their negative or their traumas.
So you have one-on-ones that you do in coaching. You also do group coaching, and you also have workshops focusing on ACEs and breaking cycles. Anything you would like to share along those lines?
What ACEs, what I do is I work with, just from my coaching clients, and also through an organization called ACEs Matters. And
Hmm.
yes, so with ACEs Matters, we have workshops, and we have video sessions where people can learn about ACEs and be able to get resources to be able to help them through, which is partly with my where some of my services come in as well. I'm
And
sorry.
how do people contact you or get involved with the group? Or do you do any of this online?
Yes, there's a lot of work that goes online. So the sessions like ACEs holds are once a month video sessions where people are able to learn about ACEs and exactly what that does and how that impacts their lives. And coaching sessions and the group sessions, those can all be online. We would like to have a lot more in-person sessions if possible, but most of the sessions are online. And workshops are sometimes in communities where there's interest in the ACEs and where they would like to learn more.
So how do people get in contact with you? Is it through your website?
Yes, it could be through my website or it could be through acesmatter.org. And so mine is gratitudebc.com, where people can reach out to me through chat or through messaging, and through acesmatter.org is also through the website.
I think that what you have done here today is you've brought this to our attention and our awareness. So, in conclusion, is there anything you want to share with the audience in any way, maybe regarding that, or just a word of encouragement, or anything that you would like to share?
We do not have to let our past define our future, and we can do so much more that we never thought was possible. And every single day is a new day to try.
And that's exactly what you've experienced in your life.
Yes.
Very good. Well, Courtney, I really appreciate what you shared. I know that it was difficult. I certainly appreciate that. I always am so moved by people who have a desire to help others from a place where they have been hurt. And that comes across so clearly because everybody's got that place to a certain degree. And we all need help. And those of us who admit it are that much more better off, right? And that's where you come in. You have to recognize that there is a problem, first of all, and what can I do so that I don't have to continue down this rabbit hole, right? Isn't that kind of what you're saying?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. I will have all this information on the web page, and people will contact you if they're interested, of course, and we look forward to having that available. And I thank you again for your time and for sharing your story.
Thank
Never,
you so
ever
much.
give up hope.
Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you for having me. This has been a wonderful experience.
Thank you for listening to Never Ever Give Up Hope, featuring Carol Graham. Did you know that most people succeed because they are determined to? Quitting was never an option. Carol loves your comments and will respond to each one. So please subscribe and review this podcast. A rating of 5 stars would be outstanding and appreciated. Remember, if you are still here, there is always hope.